Well, today's guest on the New Kind of Man podcast is Buck Watkins. Welcome to the show, Buck.
Thank you. I greatly appreciate it. I look forward to a great conversation and helping men around the world develop better skills and develop a new mindset.
Yeah, love that. And, I've been following you on Instagram for a while, and I think you kind of connected with me originally. So I've been just kind of jumping into some of the things that you talk about. And I really like what you do. And I think that wrestling has a unique perspective, really, on helping to shape young men to be men and to be good men. So I thought we would kind of jump into that. But first, I just want to ask, where do you live? What's your kind of family dynamic? And then also, what is it exactly that you do?
I live here in a small town of Armbrust, Pennsylvania. It's right about 45 minutes from Pittsburgh, and I travel the country putting on wrestling camps. I also am a high school wrestling coach at Frazier High School in a small town of Perryopolis, Pennsylvania. I travel a lot. Last summer, I put on 40,000 miles, going over 40 different wrestling camps.
Wow.
I started doing this in 2015. My goal is to help grow the sport of wrestling, but along the way, I've developed into building young men, and I am I'm just here at home. I'm getting ready to be a dad for the first time in
Oh,
November.
congratulations.
So it's kind of going to be a new adventure for me to dabble into, and I look forward to it. As I'm building these young men to wrestle, I'll be building my own from scratch this time, because most of the time as a coach, you get a kid, he already has a foundation at home, and there's a lot of, just like in life, you posted the other day, there's a lot of unlearning and relearning,
That's right.
but this time I get to start from scratch. So we'll see how I do.
Yeah. So, yeah. So we'll know in about, I don't know, 18 years or so, and we'll be able to judge how well you did, right?
Yep.
It is a unique perspective, though, on coaching, because I know this from helping men on a one-to-one or a group basis. It's kind of the same thing, when you're coaching, you're taking an individual who's had all sorts of experiences and beliefs and practices, some good, some bad. Maybe their family life's been great, some of it hasn't been. Maybe they tend to be on more of the lazy side. Maybe some are on the really active side, really, want to get after it as far as, you know, in the growth areas of manhood. So I kind of sense, the maybe a little bit of the challenge that you face, because when you have a wrestler who comes into, whether it's into camp or somebody who's on the team, I mean, you have to, it isn't one size fits all, right? So you have to go in and then address that person and help motivate him. So I really want to kind of drill down on some of those things. And again, congrats on becoming a new dad, or you're about to. That's awesome.
Thank you. I greatly appreciate it. And the challenge with wrestling is each individual is different.
Yeah.
Each individual comes in different mindset, some good, some bad, different physical abilities, some good, some bad. There's a lot of things that you have to contend with as a wrestling coach. And I think a lot of times as coaches, we get lost in the X's and O's,
Yeah.
or in wrestling, it's about the technique we get lost in. But for me, it's about developing leadership skills
Yeah.
for them to become better men, better sons, better fathers. So that's my building block right there. That's
Mm.
probably one of the biggest things that I concentrate on. And that's the biggest thing I concentrate on, not only for my own wrestling team that I'm the high school coach of, the head coach of, but also when I go to camps, I talk about developing leadership skills, because when you develop leaders, you develop a whole plethora of things
Hmm.
that fall into place. And it all starts with me. I have to, as Jocko Willnick always states, extreme ownership, own it.
Hmm.
And for me, I have to own it. And for me to own it, I have to lead. That's why I hate the word in charge, because I feel like when you're in charge, you got a stronghold on everything and it has to be your way or the highway. But when you're a leader, you lead a certain way. There's obviously certain principles and foundations that are built into leadership that everybody has to have, but everybody goes along and develops their own unique style, and it really helps when you're leading and you're showing the young men the way. Or
Mhm.
sometimes in my case, I have women who come to wrestling camps, and I teach girls too, so it's all about developing better leadership for me.
Yeah, and you just brought up a really good point, Buck, because a new kind of man, even as the name implies, it's a new kind of man. So each person has had, again, unique experiences and beliefs and value points, and all of us have we've had to deal with some wounding or tragedy or something in the past, or even in the most perfect of home, we still kind of walk into life or into manhood with their own challenges. So as we grow, I may be it may be necessary for me to grow in one area where you've already reached mastery in that area, you're killing in that area, but I need to grow in another one. So even in what you had just said, it's a new kind of man. It implies we're all a little different. And what I see is there are some general principles that can help all people, but not all people grow equally.
That's correct. Everybody goes at their own pace and rate, and you see that when, for me as a wrestling coach, I know that there's some kids when I show a technique, they'll get it as quickly as possible. Others, it will take them a long time. That's why they always say it takes 10,000 hours to become a master at something.
Right.
And I have, and I truly believe that, because I don't think and a person that really wants to keep growing never truly just settles at 10,000 hours. They go
Right.
above and beyond. They get to 20 to 30 to 50 or whatever it may be, and
Mhm.
they continue to evolve.
Mhm. So, what kind of leadership principles or leadership skills do you teach your wrestlers?
One thing that I truly believe in this is I always phrase the term whatever it takes.
Yeah.
And people ask me that all the time. Well, why do you say that? And I say whatever it takes because it's going to take whatever to get the job done. And few people are willing to, there's a lot of people who say that, but few are actually willing to embrace that.
Mm.
When I go out on my wrestling camps, I tell people whatever it takes and I'll be there. And there's times where I've had to pull off over on the side of the road, pull up in a Walmart parking lot and sleep in my truck for a couple hours, get back on the road and make sure I'm there on time. And there's not many willing to do that. Or as for when transitioning from a boy to a man, you develop new responsibilities. And let's say, you have a child on the way and you're working a minimum wage job. Well, are you willing to do what it takes to pick up another job, to work them 12 hours, to do those things?
Mm.
And some people aren't, because, the easy way is just to walk away, but the hard way is to fight through it and be there. The right way is the hard way, and not
Mhm.
many are willing to do that. So my in 3 words, whatever it takes. And I don't see many people willing to do that today.
Mm. Yeah, I don't either. Usually, maybe they may start out thinking that or thinking, oh, whatever it takes, but then once they realize how hard it is, they may kind of back away, or maybe they just get in over their head, and because they don't have a group of men around them. Speaking of men particularly, it's like if they don't have a group of men around them, kind of cheering them on, kind of leading them in the way that they should go. Sometimes men kind of operate in lonely places like that, and then you get out there and you say, oh, whatever it takes. But then you get 2 steps into it. You're like, whoa, I'm way over my head. And then they retreat because they don't have other people encouraging them. They don't have a team. And so one of the things that I wanted to kind of drill down on too is what are some of the things that you have personally learned as a wrestling coach?
I've learned to handle failure better.
Mm.
I understand that, as a leader, I should say, I own everything. Okay. And that goes along with, let me give you an example. So let's say one of my wrestlers loses the close match. It's a bad call.
Hmm.
He looks over in the corner. Obviously, I don't own that loss. the referee made a mistake, it's out of our control. But he's going to look at me in the corner and see how I react. And how I react is going to determine how he reacts. And that's owning it. I got to own that part. I got to own how I respond, because my wrestler looks for me to see what to see what to do in that very moment. And you have to control your emotions. And if I don't control my emotions, let's say I pull a Bobby Knight and throw a chair out there, then my wrestler starts, going haywire, going off the wall, and he ends up looking worse, And so for me, I gotta control my emotions right there, and he's gonna look to me, see how to handle the situation. So that's one thing that I've really learned. And I've also learned that people respect you more when they know that you've been there, or you're willing to go there with them.
Mhm.
And that goes back to that philosophy, whatever it takes. People are, I always hate when people say, oh, you're just a wrestling coach. No, I'm more than that. I want to be different. I want to be Buck Watkins. I want to be a new kind of wrestling coach, a unique one, s- something different, because I want to evolve the sport. I want to make it, better. And for me, I've found my niche traveling to small towns across the country, help them develop new skills, and not only technique, but leadership skills, developing a new mindset, developing a new outlook, because I'm here to build better people. Just, I work with predominantly males, obviously,
Yeah.
but there's women who come to my wrestling camp. So in general, I want to build better people, better, stronger individuals mentally.
Well, and that'll carry into, into adulthood too. I mean, I think that there's so many principles about wrestling. One of the things that I love about wrestling is the fact that when you're on the mat, it's you against that other person. So at the end of the day, you if you don't perform well, if you go in, your head's all cloudy, maybe you're thinking about something else, and you go in first period, you do something stupid, and you get pinned. Like, you can't look around and blame anybody else. You just have to kind of say, okay, I sucked at that. That was me. Like, whatever the mindset was that going into it, it probably wasn't right. Or if you go into a match and you get pinned by somebody who's just better than you, I think we have a choice to make there too, right? When life smacks us in the face, when we're faced with some sort of adversity, whether it's something we did to ourselves, or maybe somebody's just better at it. Even as men, maybe maybe somebody gets a job and we don't. Like, we just have to kind of own that and say, maybe they're just better at it. Maybe that wrestler was just better trained. Maybe they have better hips. Maybe maybe their balance is better. Maybe their strength to weight ratio is just better. Instead of looking around and complaining, uh, because obviously, as just as people, that's going to get us nowhere, right?
Correct. I think too, I always use this term. I always tell people, ride to the sound of the gunfire.
Mm.
Face that adversity, ride to it. Don't run away from it. Somebody pins you, get back into that wrestling room and see where you got to get better. Or, you fail that test. Well, go find a tutor, find out where you got to get better.
Mm.
You gotta ride to the sound of gunfire. If you want to be somebody that wants to lead, if you want to become a better individual, you gotta ride towards that adversity and fight it.
Mm.
Or if you retreat from it, you're gonna carry it with you for the rest of your life. The two biggest things that I've found, is the fear of failure and the pain of regret.
Mm-hmm.
And there's too many of us right now, especially men, walking around right now with the fear of failure and the pain of regret, because they're not sure where they stand right now.
Yeah, that is very well said. Yeah, the fear of failure, pain of regret. I mean, you know, at the end of the day, I think, you know, obviously the fear of failure keeps people from starting, and then the pain of regret is after you've started poorly. That's how I think of it anyway. It's like the pain of regret. It's like, I can't believe I did that. we actually learn from failure, and that we actually should be learning from that regret. If for instance, with coaching, if one of your wrestlers goes in and that they miss weight, maybe they miss weight in its region or state, or it's something big. It's like, at the end of the day, it's, that pain of regret, it should put something in their mind to say, oh man, I wasn't engaged in this. This was very poor. This was all me. And that regret it should render a positive change. How do you help wrestlers with that? Because I think a lot of men, and just think of, if you could think through the principles of it, I think a lot of men deal with that as well. It's, they've done some things wrong and maybe they're having a hard time recovering. How would you help a wrestler to be able to take that mindset and take that regret and then maybe turn it into a better performance later?
You got to for me anyways, this is how I handle a situation. I always tell people in the sport of wrestling, it's a process. Okay. What did you learn during the process? Maybe it's your last final. Let me give you an example here. So a young man on my team, 2-time state champ, he ends up wrestling in the finals this year, and he lost his final high school match, okay, in the state finals. And, he could look back and say, what if, or, feel bad about it. And instead, when I spoke to him, I said, look at all you have accomplished to get to this point. You got a scholarship to wrestle at a Division I school. You changed the culture of a community. You changed the culture of a wrestling program. People around the country know who you are. Look at all you've gained to get to this point. And if you start off poorly, you're obviously there. I always say this too, without a strong foundation, a house breaks. Without a strong why, all your hard work is for nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people start off poorly because they don't have a strong foundation. They don't have a strong family home. They don't have a strong reason why they're doing things. And so I always ask kids before they come out for wrestling, when we're in a wrestling room, I always ask them, why do you want to do this? What is your why? Why do you want to be in here for an hour and a half, 2 hours to get slammed on the mat, maybe to get beat up, or because sometimes you're the hammer, sometimes you're the nail in that wrestling room.
Oh, sure.
Adversity reveals a person's character.
Yeah.
You find that out. And in wrestling, as in life, that's exactly what wrestling means. It means to struggle. And you're going to struggle in this sport, and you're going to struggle in life. And if you don't have a strong why, you're going to face a lot of regret because your foundation isn't strong. And every time you go into something, you're going to give half effort.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I honestly wasn't expecting you to say to the why piece. And I think that's really valuable, because if they go through, then they have, the vision in front of them. You didn't put that in them. And then you're actually helping them you're helping them by motivating them to reach their goal. And
yes, absolutely.
And it may be different for some people, because, you have that wrestler you're talking about. He's already won state twice. If you were to ask him at the beginning of the year, he would have said to win state again. And of course, he lost his last match. But it would be different if somebody's a first-year wrestler, second-year wrestler. Maybe they're just not at that caliber as that state champ. So for them, it's like, what my goal is to win 5 matches, or to to not be pinned. I want to go against this guy. This guy was a state champ, and I want to go all 3 periods with him. And that may seem like, well, actually you're saying that you're losing. In essence, you're putting yourself in a position to win, to say, no. Everybody else who's wrestled this guy's been pinned within the first minute of the first period. I'm saying I want to be good enough to where I take him, even if I get beat on points, I want to take him to the edge. But it depends upon the individual. And I think sometimes we just have to be honest, even about with what our goals are, our purposes, but also what we have to offer at that time.
Yes, I agree. Sometimes it's hard. I always teach my guys this. I always said, look, I'm not instructing you to go out there with a mindset to survive.
Hmm.
I'm going in there to give you the mindset to fight.
Hmm.
Because I think this is just me. I've seen people go in survival mode and they cuddle up.
Yeah.
They just want to be out there. They just want to be a part of something.
Yeah.
No, you're going out there to fight.
Yeah.
We're getting ready for, it's for a lot of these kids, it's the closest thing that they're ever going to see to combat.
Yeah.
Okay. It is. It's that's just the truth. Um, so I'm teaching my kids to fight. I know a lot of people are like, you just need to go out there and survive. No, I've seen people survive and it not do well and end up getting pummeled because they go in this protection mode. No, go
Mm-hmm.
out and fight. See what happens. If you go out there and you fight, the person across from you is going to respect you a lot more because there's been tons of people who lay down to somebody.
Yeah.
I truly believe that. It's like, I think, me personally, I think Mike Tyson has a lot of respect for people who boxed him instead of went into that survival mode, just trying to get through the first round.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're in a fight, sometimes not only those guys respect you, they're like, wow, this guy's gotten better, because you never know what you're capable of.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know what you're capable of until you try.
Yeah, that actually reminds me of a story when my son was wrestling. My son wasn't a good wrestler, but he worked really hard. They called him the rabbit. He was the one who set the pace for all the cardio, all of the mat work. He was the one who came to the mat, and everybody else had to kind of catch his intensity. And it was a great for the team dynamic because we're all different people, and some of them they tended to be lazy. Some of them were like very in their head, and they called him the rabbit. So he kind of set the pace, like, hey, we're going to go out and we're going to kill it today. And so he brought that intensity to the mat. And for wrestling, for a dad, it was like, you're on pins and needles, because in one match, he could pin a kid in the first period, and it's like, oh, that's awesome, because it's just intense. And then there's other times where he'd go in the third period, and it'd be like 12-10, and he'd lose. So I mean, it's just like back and forth and back points, and he'd get up, and he'd get a reversal or whatever. It was like so active, but because of his intensity, other coaches within the region actually respected him. As a matter of fact, the team that won state, I think they're still winning state right now. My son, he's been out of high school for a few years, but when they were just perennial, like, state champion, the team, they would come and they had mad respect for him because he worked so hard.
Yeah, that goes back to, just in life in general. You always respect somebody who works hard,
Yeah.
and you feel for them. You're like, wow, what would be different? What's holding them back from getting over the top? And that's why I travel to small town places a lot and work at a small town school,
Mm-hmm.
because there's a lot of hard, blue collar, hard working people who just need that extra push, who just need to get that extra edge to get over the top. And I think that's what happens with men in general. They get to a certain spot and they get comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Then all of a sudden, it's the first day and somebody else walks in their life and they're like, whoa, this guy's different, what? And it pushes them. But some people just like being mediocre. It's what's happening in society right now. A lot of times,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot more excuses than there are results.
Mm-hmm. Wow, isn't that the truth? You say this phrase on a lot of your videos. You say this phrase right here. You say, "Stay humble, stay driven, live a life worth living." And of course, that's kind of sticky, and it rhymes and just kind of flows off the tongue. But why do you say this nifty little saying?
Because I think you got to stay humble. Obviously, you never know what's coming your way. You never know what you're going to face. everything could be gone in an instant.
Mm.
And I say stay driven because motivation is fleeting. Some days you wake up, yeah, I'll do it today. And then, you feel good. Then the next day you feel sore. I'll just take a day off.
Mm.
But when you're a driven person, there are no days off. And it not only do people who are driven, not only do they care about their health, but they care about gaining more knowledge, getting better at their craft, and they're willing to push through it. Like in this situation right now, we're in COVID-19, we're getting towards the tail end of it.
Mhm.
In the beginning, there's a lot of people in panic, figuring out what they're going to do. And obviously, it cut down my traveling, but that doesn't mean that I can't get better.
Mm.
So I started studying more videos, started reading more books, started, picking up different jobs
Mm.
and I learned different things. And then live a life worth living. It's a slogan I picked up years ago. And I think that, a lot of people look back in their life, they sit there and they wish they could redo it again.
Mm.
And I don't want to live that way. I don't want to look back in my life and say, "Oh, I wish I'd have done this. I wish I'd have done that." No, I want to look people in the eye and say, "Look, I did this. I came this close, but what I learned from this part here has been incredible." There's times every season in my life has been a great learning experience. I've met new people, I've learned about new cultures, and along the way, I've gained great friendships. But there's people who just sit on the couch, just being mediocre. And then when they're sitting there 80 years old saying, "Oh, I wish I'd have done this," or "I wish I'd have lived life different." I don't want to live life different. And I always want to stay humble because I know that there's people out there who don't get the opportunities that I get. And I know that someday that could be all taken away in a matter of an instant.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of reminds me of another thing that you said as well. And just kind of, you say these three things. You say that it takes time, effort, and will. And that's how you can have your skill set to meet your mindset. Could you drill down into those a little bit more? So time,
Um,
effort, and will, and how skill set can meet mindset.
well, you got to take time for both. Obviously, in sports, a lot of people, for example, wrestling's 90% mental, 10% physical. But when you look at the aspect of it, we work train 90% physical, 10% mental.
Mm.
And we have to take time to do both. And it's going to take effort. It's going to take creative ways to implement those things at the same time. Not necessarily at the same time, maybe different hours of the day. And your willpower, you got to be willing to do it. There's a lot of things that a lot of people aren't willing to do.
Mm.
So I work for a company called Wrestling Mindset, and we work with teams and individuals, particularly right in, on the mental side of wrestling. Gene and Jeff Zanetti started the company, and they've branched out to other sports. But every time I start off a session, I always ask kids and coaches, what is wrestling? Is it, we all know that wrestling's more mental and physical, but can you give out some numbers and things?
Mm.
And then afterwards, I ask the kids, well, what part of the mental part aspect of it do you actually work on?
Mm.
And a lot of kids look around like, oh, I never thought of it that way. And when an outside perspective comes in, it goes back to what you said, you unlearn and relearn.
Mhm.
So for a lot of us, they're unlearning how that physical and mental sometimes need to be separated, but there's got to be time for both.
Mm.
And so they're relearning a way to develop better habits, better routines, a stronger mindset, develop mental toughness.
Mm.
So, but it takes willpower. It truly does. It's willpower to do those things. It's the willingness to change.
Yeah.
And a lot of people aren't willing to change because we get comfortable. We sit there and we think, "Oh, I got this. I don't need to do this." Then all of a sudden, once you reach a certain there, I'm just taking a guess here, but there's a wrestling in particular, and probably all high school sports. There's a time when they go into that first year of college sports. A lot of times, it's a shell shocker to a lot of kids,
Mm.
and they're like, "Wow, I wish I would have spent a lot more time doing this instead of this." And then they start wondering what I got to do to change. And a lot of them aren't willing to change, so they never reach their success. They never reach their potential.
Mm.
And you see that happen a lot. You see, there's a lot of times in wrestling, you see a lot of guys who are ranked in the country and don't have the success that they had in high school because there's a lot of not only physical things that you have to change, but mentally too, because it's a whole nother level. Each time you level up, it requires a brand new you. It
Mm.
requires a brand new you, and sometimes that's hard.
Mm. Yeah, it is. And I was thinking about this too when you were talking about of just the challenge. You see, sometimes I think just in the realm of sports, but I also want to kind of use this to shine a light on us as men. But within the world of high school sports, you could be the rock star of your wrestling team, but then all of a sudden you go to a bigger school and you're like, yeah, you're actually average. But for years, your mom, your aunt, your grandma, everybody around town, they've been cheering you on. It's like, oh, I can't wait till you go to college. You're gonna be a national champion. And then, it's leveling up again, like you said, just to that new experience and growing. Because I think sometimes we can become, if somebody has like a natural skill set, they're just better at something. And it'd be the same thing, better at shooting or, shooting a gun or bow and arrow or shooting a basketball or wrestling. It's like some people are just kind of more naturally in tune with those things. And yet we're caused to level up when we go to like whatever that next level is. And that's really going to that's really going to show us rather if we really have the willpower to grow.
Exactly, and that's a transition too that takes from a boy to a man.
Hmm.
There's a huge transition there. There's when you become a man, you take responsibility, you face adversity, you learn to control your emotions, you learn to lead. And that transition's tough. And, transitioning from being a single guy into a relationship, that requires a new level. Then that relationship into marriage requires a new level. Then children become involved, and that requires a new level. It requires a brand new, better you. And are you willing to do that? And I think that's what happened. That's why we see in society today, we see a lot of men quit because they're not able to make that transition fully from a boy to a man.
Hmm. Yeah, and unfortunately, there's not a clear pathway for a lot of people. Uh, so a lot of boys, maybe they don't even have a strong male role model. Maybe their dad's not in the picture. Maybe it's just grandpa, but he's older and maybe kind of like, you know, he's kind of reclusive, or who knows? I mean, it could be a bunch of different reasons why. But I think that's one of the big components is they just don't have that strong male role model around, which honestly is one of the real values I see in coaching, and specifically with the epidemic now of single mothers raising kids, boys, girls, and single mothers. Quite honestly, they do a great job, but it's limited. They're just simply not. They're not male. They're not men. So there's going to be there's going to be things that they can't teach them, and I'm thankful that people like you kind of step in the gap to teach those leadership principles when that's not always evident in the home.
Yes, sometimes, I feel that its greatest reward in life is the impact that I'm able to make on others
Mm.
and watching them succeed at any age. And it's always nice to, get a text message or an email or something, say, "Hey coach, I'm doing this. Thank you for all time and effort you put into us as wrestlers during during my time to help me succeed. I get that a lot, and I value that a lot. I save them actually because it means a lot to me. It's one of my whys. There's a couple there's all I always say the why is strong because I always have a couple of them,
Hmm.
and I have them in particular order, and it helps me push to become better.
Yeah, I think that's necessary too, as far as to reinforce the why as to what you do and then also what I do. And, I'll get the encouraging messages, whether through an email or word of mouth or somebody on Instagram, and they'll send something to encourage me, and it kind of reinforces my why. And we need that, right? I mean, we need that little bit of affirmation and that little encouragement for us, especially when we're out there trying to lead and help others. What I thought was really interesting about what you said a moment ago is you talked about leaders and then helping other people to succeed. And really, isn't that's what a great man does? If you look in the span of the existence of humanity, those who were great men, they either built up others or they built up systems that helped to build others.
Yes, very true. And there's always a lineage of going down. You see where who helped them, and then you're surrounded by others who help build you. And I always, I've been reading a couple different books about different things, but one of the things I've been reading about is Become Your Own Hero.
Hmm.
And it talks about taking attributes from the people you look up to, people who have skill sets that you admire, and you kind of pick up things from them, and then you become your own hero. You become your own man. And there's a lot of things that I take from my dad. There's a lot of things that I've taken from the coaching aspect from my high school wrestling coach. There I read a lot of books from Jocko Willnick on leadership. I also read a lot of and listen to a lot of podcasts from Ryan Mickler, and I follow David Goggins and Cameron Haynes on Instagram. So I see a lot of things that they do, and I always implement them into my coaching and become as a man too to become better. So I think we as men, we need to it's always important to surround yourself with people that are like-minded, that want to become driven, that want to be better, that want to make an impact, and there's certain things that you feed off the other one.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we're at the kind of at the close of the conversation, I want to just read back this quote that you use, and then I want you to drill down on that, and then we'll probably wind it down. But you say this: you say, "Winners go all in and go all out." Drill down on that a little bit.
Um, that goes into anything, competition goes in life. You go all in. You tell someone, "Hey, I'm going to do this." But I'm not just going to do it. I'm not just going to show up. I'm going to put every ounce of effort I have to get that done. And when you do that, you keep people look at you, especially in today's world. People look at you kind of crazy, like, wow, why is he putting in that extra effort? But when you put in that extra effort, the output is 10 times greater. To get to the big things, you got to take care of the small things. And you got to be very specific in the detail. And that's what separates somebody in the lower end and somebody at the upper end, whether it's in business, life, or wrestling, or school, whatever it may be. They put in a lot of effort into every particular part of their life, whether it's eating healthy, exercise, reading, learning new things, communicating, networking, every aspect, mind, body, and soul, that
Hmm.
they're putting in all their best effort in anything. And then their output, their outcome is much better. And a lot of people aren't willing to do that because, you know, when you step into the fire, it gets hot real quick.
Hmm.
And how long are you willing to stay there to push through that, to get through there? There's not too many people willing to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And sometimes when you step in a fire, you stay in there so long and you pull it out and you pull yourself out of it and you look like, and you know, it's changed you, and you're like, wow, there's some things that are still on me that I got to get rid of. You know, I might come out in exercise and I put myself into the fire. I get into exercise and I start working out hour and a half, 40 minutes a day, or maybe doing cardio. You know, I put myself in the fire of running.
Hmm.
And then I look back and I'm like, wow, my upper body's getting weak. So what I got to do, I got to throw myself into a new fire to
Hmm.
refine myself. And you have to be willing to do that. And obviously, I know there's a lot of things that I know about wrestling, but there's a lot for me to learn to become better. So sometimes when I'm at wrestling camps and things, I always ask people, hey, I saw you do this technique. Can you do it to me? Then can I do it to you to see if it's that, because those people know what the right feel is.
Hmm.
And I need to know that I'm teaching kids the right way, that I'm giving them the right feel to hit this certain technique, that I'm doing things the right way. Because I don't want to learn something and then go, some people watch videos and then they go out and they do it and it's not exactly the right feel or the right type of leverage or the hand placement's not right. You know, the small little details.
Hmm.
And then down the road they have to unlearn and relearn, and sometimes it's too late. That's why it's, you know, Frederick Douglass always has this quote, it's easier to build strong men than to repair broken ones. And I
Hmm.
truly believe that, because when you learn a bad habit, it's hard to change. And because a lot of times what happens is when kids learn a bad habit at a young age and they keep doing the same, they get comfortable with it, so they keep doing the same things. And then by the time they get into a certain level, another level, maybe middle school or high school, and they see that this don't work, it's hard for them to relearn things a lot of times.
Yeah, it sure is. Well, Buck, it has been great to have you on the podcast today. How can people get connected with you or kind of see what you're doing in the world of coaching?
They can connect with me on Instagram at Buck_Watkins. They can also find my Facebook page, Buck Watkins, or my wrestling page, Buck Watkins Wrestling. They can also email me at watkinstrained@gmail.com. And that's ways to connect with me. I'm always happy to answer any questions, do podcasts, or speak to people at any time. I've really enjoyed being on this podcast. I think that it's a very valuable thing for as we step into new generation. It's going to take a continuing learning and evolving for us to become better.
Mm. Yep, I absolutely agree. Well, Buck, I thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I can't wait to see what else you come up with. And thanks for your time.
Thank you. I look forward to it. Thank you.